My friends and I were avid moviegoers, always excited for the latest releases. That week, a much-anticipated horror film had hit the theaters, and we planned to catch the late-night show at our local Starlight Cinema. The cinema was a bit run down, but had a certain charm that we loved. Little did we know that night would be different. We arrived buzzing with excitement and settled into our seats, a row towards the back, prime spot for movie watching. As the previews began, I noticed a man entering the theater alone. He was an odd sight, disheveled, wearing a long, tattered coat despite the mild weather. What was truly unsettling, though, was his demeanor. He glanced around furtively before choosing a seat directly behind us. Throughout the movie, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. The man seemed too interested in us, occasionally leaning forward, his breath ragged and heavy. He would occasionally mutter under his breath a string of incoherent words. My friends, engrossed in the film, initially brushed off my concerns, but as the night wore on, they too began to feel the man's unsettling presence. He seemed to react strangely to the movie, laughing at moments that were far from funny and whispering to himself during tense scenes. Our discomfort turned to alarm when I felt something brush against my hair. I turned around sharply, only to find the man leaning towards us, his eyes wide and unblinking. It was as if he was studying us, his gaze intense and unnerving. That was the last straw. We gathered our things and moved to seats further down. But even from a distance, I could feel the man's gaze on us, unyielding and intrusive. As the movie neared its end, I excused myself to use the restroom. Walking down the dimly lit corridor, I heard footsteps behind me. Glancing back, my heart sank. It was the man following me with a steady, determined pace. Panic surged through me. I quickened my pace, reaching the restroom and locking myself in a stall. My mind raced with fear as I heard the restroom door creak open. Footsteps echoed on the tiled floor, stopping just outside my stall. I held my breath, praying he would leave. Minutes stretched on, every second an eternity of fear. Finally, the footsteps receded and the restroom door closed again. I waited, counting to 100 before daring to leave my hiding spot. As I rushed back to the theater, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was that man, and what did he want? My relief at seeing my friend safe and sound was palpable. I recounted my terrifying encounter, and we decided to leave immediately. We approached the theater staff, explaining the situation. They seemed concerned and promised to handle it. As we left the theater, I glanced back to see two employees cautiously approaching the man, who was now staring blankly at the now empty screen. The drive home was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts, processing the night's events. The fear and unease lingered, a stark contrast to our initial excitement. In the following days, we heard that the man was a local with known mental health issues. The theater staff had dealt with him before, but that night his behavior had escalated. While I felt a pang of sympathy, the fear he instilled in us was still too raw, too real. Working at the theater was mostly relaxed, scooping popcorn, tearing ticket stubs, and the occasional mess in the bathroom. But one late Saturday night, something happened that turned my layback job into a scene from a horror movie. It was around midnight, and the last show was about to end. I was working with another colleague, Laura, cleaning up and getting ready to close. That's when he walked in, a man with an unsettling presence. I politely told him that we were closing and there were no more shows for the night. His reaction was jarring. He stared at me with a menacing frown, his eyes boring into mine. For a moment, I thought he might lash out. But then, in an instant, his expression changed. He put on a bright, almost exaggerated smile and said in a jovial tone, "Oh, don't worry. I'm just waiting for my daughter. She's watching a movie." His sudden shift from anger to cheerfulness was terrifying. It felt unnatural, like watching an actor switch roles seamlessly. He then took a seat on one of the lobby benches, his gaze fixed on me. As I continued my closing tasks, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His eyes never left me, following my every move. It was as if he was studying me, and his unsettling smile never wavered. Finally, the last movie ended, and the patrons began to file out. They all walked past the man, who remained seated, his unblinking stare still focused on me. No one joined him. No daughter emerged from the crowd. My heart raced with unease. Who was he really waiting for? Once the theater was empty, the man stood up and left without a word. His abrupt departure left me even more unsettled. I had so many questions. Where was his daughter? What did he want? Was he waiting outside for me? Laura noticed my distress and asked if I was okay. I I told her about the man and my growing fear. With my heart pounding, I realized my predicament. I had ridden my bike to work. She offered to call someone for me, but I didn't want to trouble anyone. Mustering up courage, I decided to make the ride home. The night was eerily quiet as I unlocked my bike and hurriedly set off. As I pedaled through the dimly lit streets, every shadow and sound made me jump. Then, I noticed a car slowly trailing behind me. Its headlights were dim, and it kept a steady, ominous pace. Panic set in. Was it him? The man from the theater? The car sped up, edging closer. I pedaled faster, my heart racing. The once familiar streets now felt like a labyrinth of terror. The car kept pace, its engine a low growl in the silence of the night. I took a sudden turn down a side street, hoping to lose him. The car followed, its presence looming like a predator stalking its prey. My legs burned with exertion, fear fueling my desperate escape. The chase continued through the neighborhood, a terrifying game of cat and mouse under the moonlit sky. I knew these streets well and took a risky shortcut through a narrow alley, barely squeezing through with my bike. Glancing back, I saw the car slow down, unable to follow. I seized the opportunity, pedaling with every ounce of energy I had left. The car disappeared from view, but I didn't slow down, not until I reached the safety of my home. I threw my bike down and rushed inside, locking the door behind me. I peered through the window, half expecting to see the car's headlights, but there was nothing, only the quiet darkness of the night. My parents were asleep, unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded. I didn't tell them, not wanting to worry them or sound paranoid, but sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying the chase over and over. The experience left a mark on me. I never rode my bike to work again, and the theater lost its charm. I was constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if the man or that car would reappear. I want to tell you about an incident that happened years ago, one that still makes me shiver. It involves my sister, an old computer, and the psychological aftermath of watching the horror movie The Ring. My sister had just moved in with me, leaving our hometown for new opportunities. To celebrate her arrival, we decided to catch a movie. Our choice, The Ring. I admit, I've always been easily spooked, and that movie terrified me beyond words. The whole concept of a cursed video and the 7 days deadline haunted me. Fast forward to exactly 1 week after watching the movie. My sister was out with a friend, and I found myself alone at home. I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread, the haunting notion that it had been 7 days since we watched The Ring. I tried to distract myself in the living room, but fear clung to me like a shadow. That's when it happened. Across the room, my sister's old computer, which had been silent all evening, suddenly started booting up. The screen flickered to life, its glow piercing the dimly lit room. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was staring right at me, an inanimate harbinger of my deepest fears. Panic set in. My mind raced with scenes from the movie, and I could almost see the eerie image of the well appearing on the screen. I backed into the corner, my heart pounding, bracing for the worst. I was convinced this was it. The curse was real, and it was coming for me. As I stood there, paralyzed with fear, hyperventilating and preparing for my doom, bam, the front door burst open. My sister and her friend walked in, talking and laughing, oblivious to the horror unfolding in the living room. I was a mess, huddled in the corner, wide-eyed and pointing at the computer with a trembling finger. It just turned on by itself, I managed to stammer out. My sister paused, her expression shifting from amusement to confusion, then to realization as she remembered the movie we'd seen a week ago. She burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the room. Oh, that computer is old. It just does that randomly. The relief that washed over me was indescribable. I felt my tense muscles relax, and a wave of embarrassment hit me. I rushed to change my underwear, my sister's laughter still ringing in my ears. That night, I learned a valuable lesson about the power of suggestion and how fear can play tricks on the mind. The movie had left such a profound impact that I had allowed myself to believe in the impossible. The incident became a running joke in our family, but to me, it was a reminder of the thin line between fiction and reality in our minds. I still watch horror movies, but I've learned to separate on-screen terror from real life, most of the time anyway. The Marlowe was a relic of the past, an Art Deco-style theater that had somehow survived the digital age. It was known for its retro charm and for showing classic films. I was a regular, a cinephile who relished the nostalgia of 35mm film in an era of streaming and pixels. One evening, the Marlowe advertised a special showing of The Nightwalker, a 1960s horror film known for its eerie atmosphere and twisted plot. I had never seen it before, and the prospect of watching it in its original format was irresistible. The theater was sparsely populated that night. A few other movie enthusiasts and I sat scattered among the red velvet seats, the smell of stale popcorn lingering in the air. The lights dimmed, the projector whirred to life, and the film began. It started as a typical thriller, a story of a woman haunted by dreams after the mysterious death of her husband. But about 30 minutes in, something odd happened. The scene, a tense, shadow-laden sequence where the protagonist hears whispering from a darkened room, began to repeat. At first I thought it was a glitch, a hiccup in the old projector, but the scene replayed again and then again, each time growing slightly more disturbing. The whispers became more urgent, the shadows darker, the protagonist's expression more terrified. The audience grew restless, some chuckling nervously, others calling out for the projectionist to fix the issue. I felt a growing sense of unease, a chill that crept up my spine. Something was deeply wrong. As the scene repeated for the 5th time, the film's reality and ours began to blur. The whispering seemed to emanate from around us, not just from the screen. The shadows in the film stretched beyond their celluloid boundaries, creeping along the walls of the theater. Panic set in. I, along with the rest of the audience, rushed to the exits, only to find them locked, as if sealed by an invisible force. We were trapped, prisoners to the repeating scene that was slowly unraveling into chaos. The protagonist on the screen, now visibly pale with fear, seemed to notice us. She looked out from the screen, her eyes pleading for help as if she were aware of her endless loop of terror and our role as unwilling spectators. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that filled the theater. They were no longer part of the film, but something else, something alive and malevolent. The air grew cold, and the feeling of being watched, hunted, even overwhelmed us. In a desperate attempt to break the cycle, I hurled my soda at the screen. The can passed through it as if it were a portal, disappearing into the film's shadowy room. The protagonist screamed, a sound that was too real, too filled with genuine terror. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the film snapped, the screen going blank. The projector sputtered and died, leaving us in darkness. The theater's emergency lights flickered on, revealing the shaken audience in the unlocked exits. We stumbled out into the night, the once charming facade of the Marlowe now appearing sinister under the dim streetlights. No one spoke. Words were inadequate for what we had experienced. In the following days, the Marlowe remained closed, a police investigation citing a faulty projector and mass hysteria as the causes of the incident. But those of us who were there knew the truth. We had witnessed something unexplainable, a tear in the fabric of reality where a film became a living, breathing entity. I've never returned to the Marlowe, nor have I watched The Nightwalker again. The memory of that night lingers like a bad dream, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. Click on this next video if you enjoyed for more content like this, and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel.